Bitcoin doesn't need the different countries, but the different countries need Bitcoin. Why would I stay in a country that makes my life difficult? Why does the government want to decide for me how I live my life? They should be there to make my life easier. Energy is what's going to bring Bitcoin into Europe, not Bitcoin as a money, but Bitcoin mining as a solution to our energy problem.
I'm Barbara Lerins, and you are listening to Bitcoin Kebab, the podcast from BitcoinBázis. Hi, Rachel. Thank you for joining us today.
Good morning, and thank you very much for inviting me.
So let's start with our first question already. What was your orange pill moment?
When I read the book from Alex Gladstein, Check Your Financial Privilege. I'd done a lot of research up till then, but reading that book, it just was a light bulb moment that I thought, the money system's broken. I've lived in a lot of different countries. So in the last quarter of a century, we've lived in China, we've lived in Africa, we've lived in the Middle East, and then always back to Europe. And I would see how life was in all of those countries, particularly with China and with Africa. And you would wonder why Africa is probably South Africa was the most beautiful country I've ever lived in. And you think, why doesn't it work? And then the book showed how the whole financial system is constructed, in the way that you're taking the resources out of the third world countries and sending them to the first. And it just was click. And then I thought, I have to work for Bitcoin. I have to work for Bitcoin. And since then, it's just been the most exciting journey ever.
Did you have some kind of financial background before that, or were you always interested in finances, or was it just
No. I mean, so the very original thing was, I studied business, and I was always responsible for the finances of the family. That was maybe a little bit unusual that was my job to do any of that. But in 2017, we were living in Africa, and my son came to visit, and he said, Mum, you need to have a look at Bitcoin. And I was, gosh, I don't really have time. And I said, look, I tell you what, I'll give you a little bit of money and you buy some Bitcoin for my husband and for me. And we have four children. So buy a little bit of Bitcoin for all of the children. And we gave it as a Christmas present. And we said to them, you have to keep it for 1 year, because that's the rule in Germany. If you keep it for a year, you don't have to pay tax on any gains that you make. And so we bought it right at the peak in 2017. It was when it was $17,000. We gave a little bit to the children, and then it crashed down to $3,000 a few weeks after Christmas. And so, of course, the children, well, this is not a great Christmas present. And I didn't really think about it anymore. And then that son just kept posting in our family chat, you need to be reading this book, you need to be watching that podcast. And it was becoming too much. And I said, look, I'm going to have to ban you from the family chat, or ban the topic from the family chat. So I opened a new chat called Bitcoin Banter, and said to the family, anyone can opt in. So if you're interested in learning about Bitcoin, you can opt in. And I was interested, but I didn't have much time. And then go forward to 2020 when the pandemic hit. We had to leave South Africa unexpectedly, and I left my job behind, and my husband left his job behind, and I had time. And I started actually looking at the things that my son Patrick was posting, and and he's fantastic. He's technical. He's a technical guy, so he understands it very much from the technical point of view. And then when it clicked with me, this moment, I will be forever grateful to that son, because it was not easy for him. We called him our Bitcoin Jesus.
So he was preaching about Bitcoin a lot.
But he didn't give up. And I'm so grateful that he didn't give up. And it's been an interesting one, because our family is quite divided on that, still quite divided on the topic. So he and I are the ones who are very much into it. Some of the family members invest in Bitcoin. For me, it's just not an investment. I have these 4 adult children, and I want them to have a sustainable future. And I see in Bitcoin this sustainable future. And, then I think I'm quite unusual in this space. I went to my very first Bitcoin conference in Switzerland, And I walked in there, and it's called the Citadel, so it was quite a hardcore thing. And I walked in there, and it was just young developers, and I was pretty much the only woman, and I was definitely the only grey-haired woman. And I thought, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? I had a fantastic weekend where I was just thinking, I was looking around, listening to what was being said, and just thought, there's so much brain in this room. There's so much brain. They can't all be wrong. And, and then at age 53, I did an unpaid internship at a mining company to learn more about mining. And then it's just taken off from there. I was invited to a very well-known German podcast, Nico Jilsch, to talk about my Bitcoin journey. I'd set up a company at that point with my son to advise people on Bitcoin and integrating Bitcoin into their business. But it was a very fledgling company. And I was invited onto this podcast. And then shortly after that, we had a big conference in Innsbruck, and everybody knew me. And this was surreal. This was not how my life had been up to then. And one thing led to another. I now work full time for a Bitcoin mining company in Germany. And it's very interesting what we're doing. In Europe, we're going to have to be very different the way we approach Bitcoin mining to how America is approaching it, or countries which have got cheap electricity. And I never expected at the age of 53 that my life would take a completely different turn. It changes you.
So you said that you only started to actually look into it on a deeper level in 2020, but now you are already the vice president of...
Yeah, I would say it took me a good year of intense study for that light bulb moment to come, because you have to go back to basics. You have to take everything out of your head that you thought you knew. I thought I understood more or less how the world worked. I mean, not a genius, but you think I didn't know what money was. So it starts, okay, what's money? How does it work? And you go back to all of these basics, and you think, oh my goodness, everything that I've thought until now, I have to, it maybe wasn't true or not completely true. And then I went to as many conferences as I could to learn as much as I could, and to meet as many people as I could. And one thing has just led to another. So, I started this full-time job with Terahash, and it's very exciting what we do. And then I could see, because of Terahash, it was necessary that, I think politicians are going to be the very last people who understand what Bitcoin is and the benefits of Bitcoin mining, because they've got a vested interest not to understand what it is. But I think it's very important that companies understand the implications. And so this is the main reason why I then founded the European Bitcoin Energy Association, because I think it's good just to have this independent entity where people who are interested in becoming informed about the potentials of Bitcoin mining for the energy infrastructure of the EU, that there's somewhere that they can go. So, so it went from Terahash to now I'm the chair of the board of EBIA. And at the same time, when I was going around to all of these conferences, and I was thinking, well, where are the women? Because Bitcoin is made for women, in my opinion. I mean, maybe I'm a little bit old-fashioned on this, but my greatest gift to society, in my opinion, is the 4 children that I've had. And I spent a quarter of a century bringing up these children, but you're not paid for it, and it puts you in a very weak position. When you've taken a lot of time out of the workforce, and my pension's rubbish. I know that, and I think that women my age tend to understand Bitcoin more quickly than younger women, because we can see the pain point coming of, when I stop working, I'm not going to have enough money to live. And so I then started this movement called Les Femmes Orange, which is French for the orange women, just to take a different feminine approach to try and attract more women into the space, because they see it as, okay, it's something financial and it's something very technical. And if you want to generalize, and it is a generalization, because obviously there are fantastic women in the programming space, but generally men are interested in things and women are interested in people. And so the majority of women just don't think it's something for them. And when you go to these conferences, because the conferences are basically designed by men and put on by men, they choose to cover the topics which sets them alight. And often it's not the same topics that might set a woman alight. So we take a much more social approach to it. We start, okay, why do we need Bitcoin? Why do I need it? Why do my children need it? Why does society need it? And have much more discussions on it. And we do many more workshops so that the women can see, how do I use it? If I know how to use it, I don't have to understand it on a deep technical level, but I need to know how to use it safely. And this Les Femmes Orange has really taken off. We've got lots of different meetups in Germany. It's now in Tel Aviv, in Stockholm, in the UK. And I think what's going to happen is women are going to be instrumental in bringing Bitcoin into society. They tend to be the decision makers in the family about what gets spent. It still is like that. And once a woman understands what Bitcoin is and understands the repercussions or the benefits for society, they're on fire. It's wonderful to see. So this whole, it then takes on a life of its own, and women tend to be better communicators. They tend to be better networkers, and we can spread this stuff. So I think, this is very sexist. I'm sure that Satoshi Nakamoto was a man. It's this absolute genius, focused, brilliance of a technology which has been created. And now the task is, there's still work to go to refine it, to make it something that 8 billion people can use. But we need to bring it out into the world. And I think that's where the skills of women will be very useful.
Do you have like some kind of initiatives to like expand this circle further for like ladies in crypto, or can I join online if I want to?
Yes, we have. So we have 2 Telegram groups at the moment, one in English and one in German. I mean, Bitcoin is really big in Germany. It's really big. And I don't use the word crypto because for me, I very much differentiate. There's Bitcoin and there's all the other cryptocurrencies. And I'm only for Bitcoin. It's the only one which is truly decentralized. It's the only one which is a true peer-to-peer network. There's no company behind it. There's no foundation behind it. I think it's already won the race, the network, race. And I believe that Bitcoin is going to be the next global currency. I don't know when that's going to happen. And I don't see any of the other cryptocurrencies fulfilling the same kind of role that Bitcoin does. So for me, and this is what we're very strict with Les Femmes Orange. There's only one rule, and that is Bitcoin only. I think it can be very confusing for people when they come, they don't know really what it is. And then you've got these 20,000 different cryptocurrencies, and it's all very overwhelming. And it's very important, as the first thing, is that you differentiate. Why is Bitcoin not crypto? I mean, obviously it's a cryptocurrency, but it's not in the same basket as all of the other cryptocurrencies. They all came after Bitcoin. They think they're improving upon things that Bitcoin can't do. And in some ways it might be correct, but then you always take away, if you want to become faster, you take away from the decentralization. And for me, the decentralization, that there's nobody in charge, that there's no company behind this, that we all have to play by the same rules. That's what makes Bitcoin the phenomenon that it is and that it will be. So, yeah, so it's growing by itself. And this is the beauty of Bitcoin is a grassroots movement. So although we do talk to politicians, we do talk to the press, the most important people for Bitcoin are the people. And you can make that decision for yourself. It doesn't matter what your governments rule. You make the decision for yourself. Do I think that Bitcoin is more of a sound money than my euro, my dollar, my pound, where I have no influence whatsoever about how much of it will be printed and when it will be printed? And I think as soon as people have done enough studying and enough understanding, they realize that Bitcoin is an independent asset, at the moment an asset, but it will become more than an asset. And in some parts of the world, it already is more than an asset. But the beauty of it is I can choose for myself. I don't have to wait until the government sets rules up. I can buy my Bitcoin from somebody in the street if I don't want to buy it on an exchange. Or there's lots of peer-to-peer apps where you can buy your Bitcoin. So Les Femmes Orange, I didn't want it to be an organization. I wanted it to be a movement, because there shouldn't be one person associated. There shouldn't be a leader or a group of leaders. It should be, you set the fire in the belly of the people, and then they go out and they set the fire in the belly of other people. And that it's happening.
Yeah, it's certainly very inspiring that more and more people, especially more and more women, are joining the space. Yeah, like when we started a company in 2017 in Hungary, there was not not women, but no one in the space yet.
Mm.
And I know that we really needed to make efforts to influence the government or the politicians to implement laws that are supporting the growth of Bitcoin and crypto in general, and not limit that.
Yeah.
And I know
what they have to understand is Bitcoin doesn't need the different countries, but the different countries need Bitcoin. So if your government decides to implement laws which make make it more difficult for the citizens to use Bitcoin, they are only disadvantaging their citizens. They are not stopping Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is unstoppable. It will happen somewhere else in the world. And what you see happening is that the people will move to the parts of the world where they have easier access, or where it's accepted legal tender, or so what the governments need to understand is this thing cannot be stopped. It can also not be regulated. It doesn't need to be regulated, because it's regulated in and of itself, because the rules are all in the protocol. So what governments need to understand is they need to make their country a place which is welcoming and innovative. So when I look at what we're doing with Terahash, we believe that Bitcoin mining is going to play a very large role in assisting the energy transformation that has been wanted to come around. So this move on to renewable energies. And companies are starting to understand that. So we had, every month we have a tour of the lab. We've got a research lab where we have all the different kinds of machines. We have renewable energy. We test the machines. And more companies are understanding the potentials, and they're coming to see what we're doing and how can they integrate it into their company. So in the last lab tour that we had last Friday, there's a company who's making pumps, and there's a company who does the switching for heating systems. When do I turn my heating on? So all of these companies are already starting to think, oh, this is interesting, this Bitcoin mining. I need to learn more about it. And the more companies that understand how interesting it is, and the larger the companies that understand, they are the ones who will then have the power of lobbying to go to the governments and say, this is a good thing. Don't ban it, because if you really want to achieve net zero, or if you really want to achieve all these things that you say you want to achieve, one way to help us get there is flexible data centers, which is all that Bitcoin mining is. It's just a flexible data center. And then you can show, we've just done a project in Finland where we have 120 Bitcoin miners, and we sell the heat to a district heating company. And with the heat of the Bitcoin miners, we heat 12,000 homes. Now, Bitcoin data centers can do this because, firstly, you get a much higher heat out of a Bitcoin data center than you do out of a Google data center or an artificial intelligence. And you need this high heat. So we've actually got specialized machines made for us that we can get 80 degrees out of the machines. You need that. Data center Bitcoin, you can turn it off anytime you want to, because there's not a customer. So for grid operators who are trying to stabilize their grids, and it's really hard to stabilize your grid when a lot of your input is from renewable energy. You don't know when the sun is going to shine. You don't know when the wind is going to blow. But you have to keep your grid stable at all times at 50 hertz. And when we used to use coal, then you could turn the coal power stations up and down, or gas, you can turn them up and down, or nuclear, you can turn them up and down, but you can't turn the sun up and down, and you can't turn the wind up and down. And so the grid operators understand quite quickly when you come along and you say, I have got this data center that will consume huge amounts of energy, but you can turn it off whenever you need that energy for other customers. They understand instantly, oh, that's really useful because there's no other customer that can do the same as that. And so we're seeing lots of projects starting, particularly in Scandinavia, to use the heat in order to heat, to do district heating. There's a project that's starting now in Austria to stabilize the grid. And so a lot of our work at the moment is educational. These companies come and see us. We talk about what it is. We show what it can do. And then it will be these companies that are all, with the Siemens of the world, the big companies that will then be the ones to go to the government and say, we need Bitcoin mining.
Can you please walk us through what is Terahash that Space is doing exactly?
Okay, so we've got three main pillars upon which we're built. So one pillar is education, because obviously it's a completely new field and nobody knows what it is. And so you have to do an awful lot of work at the beginning to try and explain what it is and why we think that it's a long-term thing and why we think that it's something that's beneficial to invest in. Because that's one of the difficulties with Bitcoin mining. There are so many different variables. The price of the ASIC machines is as variable as the Bitcoin price. As the price of Bitcoin goes up, the machines have become more expensive to buy. The price of Bitcoin, we know it goes up, down, but of course, over a long-term period, it's going up, but it's volatile, and companies don't like dealing with volatility. You don't know what the difficulty rate is going to be. So that depends on how many computers around the world are trying to solve the problem. And the more computers that are trying to solve the problem, the more difficult it is to solve the problem, and the less likely it is that you're going to get the Bitcoin. So you've got all these variables. So people who want to invest in Bitcoin mining have to have a good understanding of how it works. And they have to have an understanding of why it's still a good bet, despite all these variables. You're still probably in a win situation by investing in Bitcoin mining, because over the longer run, the price of Bitcoin is going to go up, and it will be a successful business. So education is a very big part. Then we have an area called managed mining. So we're only interested in B2B. I personally don't believe that a private person doing hosted mining makes any sense whatsoever. If you buy one or two machines and you host them in America or Ethiopia, you don't know if the company is running your machines. You have no power. You'll be better off taking that money, buying Bitcoin and hodling it. Maybe you're doing it as a bit of fun, but it doesn't really make sense. And there's a lot of cowboy companies out there doing hosted mining. We've been stung a couple of times ourselves, but we work together with businesses who are interested in investing in long-term sustainable projects. So we only do sustainable projects, and we only do Bitcoin mining for our customers, which really, you reuse the heat, or you're doing demand response, or there's a secondary income. You're incorporating it into the energy structure. We do mining just for ourselves. We've got machines around the world, also to test different places to see, is this something that I would recommend to people? But our long-term aim is to really bring Bitcoin mining to Europe. So yes, of course, you can invest. You get cheap electricity in Ethiopia at the moment, but who's to say what's going to happen tomorrow? We were mining in Paraguay, and the government makes a decision overnight, and then a lot of the miners have to disappear. If you're doing it in Europe, as we're doing it in Europe, that's a jurisdiction where you think, okay, I know the laws of Europe. I have more faith in that the company will still be around, that they're following all the laws, they're following all the rules, they won't be shut down. And this is a very interesting part, which is growing quickly. There are people who want to invest. There are companies who want to invest in Bitcoin mining, but they don't want to have the hassle of having to do it all themselves. And so that's a service that we offer. And then lastly, we have this area where if you want to incorporate Bitcoin mining into your business, and this is the whole reason why Terahash started. Terahash is part of a family group which has got 3 factories. We have a factory that makes cosmetics, we have a factory that makes car parts, and we have a factory that makes spraying technology, plastic spraying technology. And we have an extremely high energy consumption. And as the price of electricity was going up in Europe with the Ukraine war and the pipeline to Russia, it was becoming increasingly difficult for us to produce our products in a way that we could sell them, because it's a global market. And as electricity was such a high part of our costs, we can't pass those costs on to the customer because then our products are too expensive. And so we thought right at the beginning, or the founder of the company thought, well, why don't I incorporate Bitcoin mining? I have all this solar on my roof. At the weekends, I don't need to, there's no shifts. So I've got all this surplus energy. And I always need heat for my company. So it started off, we were trying to solve a problem for ourselves. We were trying to become more independent, energy independent, that we weren't reliant on energy out of the grid. And so we offer this service as well to companies that have surplus energy, have heating requirements, just want to become self-sufficient. They don't want to be relying on electricity out of the grid. We can advise you, we can design it, we can build it, we can maintain it, or we can just sell you the machines and you do it yourself. Any from A to Z, we can produce that, we can do the full service, or they can just buy the machines from us, or they can just buy the know-how from us and we tell them what they should be buying and how to set it up. Mm-hmm. And this is really interesting. I mean, we've just set up, for example, a car wash in Germany. So they have a lot of solar, and because it gets very cold here, they need to have underfloor heating so that it doesn't ice over in the winter. When you're washing the cars and you've got the water on the ground, you've got to be careful it doesn't ice over. So they're using the Bitcoin miners. Firstly, the heat comes out and it gets rid of the snow on the top of the solar panels so that they can keep working. And it does the underfloor heating so that it never freezes. And then in the summer, it provides them with hot water so you can wash the cars with hot water rather than cold water, which is much more efficient because then you're much quicker to, get rid of all the insects and get rid of all the dirt on the car. And so there he is. He had the solar anyway. It was more than he needed. He needed heat. And so he's incorporated that into his business. And there will be more and more businesses who are starting to, and we see it, they come and visit us. How can I incorporate Bitcoin mining in my own business? And this is wonderful because this will make Bitcoin mining more decentralized. Rather than having these big farms in America or Ethiopia or wherever they are, we really want Bitcoin mining to remain as decentralized as Bitcoin itself so that there's no point of attack.
I also wanted to go back to the regulations for a moment because as we saw a couple of years ago, China banned Bitcoin mining completely. Do you have any stats about who took over or who is currently the leading in hash power?
America's definitely got the highest hash rate, but that's the interesting thing about China. Yes, they banned it, but there's an awful lot of Bitcoin mining going on in China. You can't ban it. You can't ban it. All that will if you ban it, then yes, there'll be a lot of machines that will leave your country and they'll go to another country and they'll mine elsewhere. And you're shooting yourself in the foot. And it's, how do you control whether somebody's mining Bitcoin or not? If they've got their own energy source, how do you want to control whether they're not running some miners and, they can use a VPN so that you can't detect where the with the internet where it's actually being mined. So it's a very hard thing to control. And all that did was meant that now, I think at the time, China probably had about 30% of the world's hash rate. Well, that would have put them in such a strong position. And America's recognizing this. I mean, Trump, whatever you think about Trump, and I also don't believe that he knows himself what Bitcoin is. He doesn't talk on the level that I think, okay, you've understood it. but he's got a very good team around him, and he's got members of the team who definitely understand what Bitcoin is. And he's very keen to bring as much Bitcoin mining to America as can be.
Mm-hmm.
We're all going to have to follow suit at some point. And the sooner you understand this, the better. You know, it's game theory. You know, who's the first? They'll do very well on this. So I think, you know, Europe has to be much more intelligent about Bitcoin mining than other parts of the world, because our electricity is so expensive. Because we don't have abundant sun like you have in Texas or Saudi Arabia, we need to make sure that so we can stay competitive on a global level. So we're competing with countries that have got their electricity for 2 cents. We don't have our electricity for 2 cents. But if I can also sell the heat, and maybe I get 5, 6, 7 cents for my heat, then I become competitive again, because these countries like Saudi Arabia, they don't need the heat. We in Europe, we need the heat. You know, I think agriculture is going to be an area where Bitcoin mining is going to be extremely interesting. If you're a farmer who has animals, you know, they often need heat all year round. If you've got the baby animals, you know, they always need to have heat. If you're drying crops, or there's many circumstances where farms, they've got a lot of land, they can put a lot of solar up, they can have maybe windmills. Yes, you'll have battery, you know, so you'll be storing some of the energy in your battery, but there will always be times where you've got this surplus energy. Then you can buy the cheap miners. You wouldn't get the most efficient miners, maybe buy the cheap miners and just have them running. They don't cost very much. You're earning a few Satoshis, non-KYC. Nobody knows that you're buying them. There are so many different constellations. If you need the heat, you need to be getting the more efficient machines that are better extracting the heat. We work a lot with the hydro miners because they're the most efficient at getting the heat out. But I think that's going to be a very interesting area, agriculture and Bitcoin mining.
So if I have a company or if I have a farm and I want to start mining today, like what are the steps that I need to take?
You need to learn a lot because it's changing a lot. It's really interesting when you go down into our research lab, which is only 2 years old. And the very first machines that we had, there were no hydro machines on the market at that time. So we took the air-cooled miners and took off the fans and put pipes in them, and we made them into hydro miners, you know, with not terribly professionally, but it worked. 2 years later, you've got absolutely fantastic plug-and-play solutions with water-cooled miners. You buy these racks and you can put 2 machines in, 5 machines in, 10 machines in. It's all modular. So the market is changing extremely quickly. Innovation is happening extremely quickly. And it's very hard for individual businesses to keep abreast of it, which is why it's so useful, the work that we're doing, because we're specialized in what are the machines around the world, who's doing what kind of research, where do I need to focus? So I think, you need to do a lot of research about what are your primary requirements. Am I looking to use the heat? Am I just looking to earn some Satoshis? How much surplus energy do I have? Is it worth me building more solar than I actually need because I think the benefits of Bitcoin mining are so great, I want to have that surplus energy? For example, we have a factory in Eastern Germany where we produce car parts, and we have just put a solar farm next to it on a field that we had for 1.6 megawatts. We only need half of that for our factory. Mm-hmm. We knew, then we can have a container running of Bitcoin miners. And so you have to then do the calculation. Is it worth investing the extra money in the extra 700 kilowatts of solar energy? Is it worth it then to run some Bitcoin mining? Often it's not worth it. It's not, you have to really do your calculations carefully. You have to work out your worst case, middle case, best case scenario, because nobody can tell you the price of Bitcoin in next year or next month or next week. But you can learn a lot from history, what has happened in the last cycles. You keep abreast of what's going on in the world. How many countries are opening itself to Bitcoin? How many companies are opening itself to Bitcoin? The narrative is definitely changing. It used to be that generally the press would say it's a dirty thing, it's a negative thing. Now, more and more established research centers are coming up with Bitcoin mining is net positive for the climate, for the environment, for the people. So the more the narrative is changing, the more people are looking into, okay, then I can look into this and I can see what it is.
Yeah, there was like for such a long time this debate that like Bitcoin mining is ruining our life because it uses so much energy. And then there was like another study earlier, a couple of years back, that basically the Christmas lights in America consume more energy than Bitcoin mining in a year.
I mean, one thing is for sure, it consumes enormous quantities of energy. But we have to understand that consuming energy is not bad. Consuming energy is what makes us advance as a species. You know, if you don't want to consume any energy, you can go back to the Stone Age and you can sit there with your candle. But every country which is successful consumes a lot of energy. The important thing is, where does that energy come from? That's what's important. So you want to make sure that you're using as sustainable a source of energy as you can. And the best way of regulating this is not through government regulations, but through market forces. And that's what Bitcoin mining is. It's an absolute open market. I will not run my Bitcoin miners if it is not economically viable for me to do so. Nobody keeps their machines running when the price of electricity is too high. So you're definitely not taking energy away from other people. If there's other industries which will pay more for that energy, you're not going to get a Bitcoin miner who says, okay, I'll pay more, because he's mining at a loss. So it's not going to happen. So it's this beautiful self-regulatory thing. If the energy is cheap, and energy is cheap when it's when it's surplus, when it's not really needed, then it becomes cheap. And we have this ridiculous situation in Europe where often there are negative prices for the energy. So the operators are paying people to take their energy. And who eventually pays this price? It's the taxpayer. Because we have this ridiculous policy, we need as much renewable as we can. So we build out all these renewables.
Yeah. And then you need to stabilize the grid.
And then you need to stabilize it. They didn't think it through. They didn't think through the fact that our grid is just not built for renewable energies. So they've been subsidizing solar, they've been subsidizing wind. So all of these farms have been built. Some of them have never been used. Enormous amounts of money have gone into it. And if you drive around the countryside, how often do you see the windmills not running? The solar farms are curtailed because, you know, the grid does not want the energy. It doesn't make sense. But bring along a container full of Bitcoin miners that will turn on. Okay, nobody else wants that electricity. I can have it for 1 cent. I can have it for 0 cent. It's better to have it for 0 cent than to waste it. And this is another law that's just come in Germany, which works very well in our favor. What they would like now is to use and not curtail surplus energy. Well, the best way of doing that is incorporating Bitcoin mining.
That's definitely an interesting like partnership. Do you see like any exciting partnership that can improve mining sustainability? So for example, like the producers of solar panels maybe at some point could already like implement.
Yes, we've just started a joint venture with a very large solar panel producer. Oh, not producer, he doesn't produce, sorry, they sell here. They can see the combination of solar and battery and Bitcoin mining has great potential, you know, in some kind of combination. So we're building up a lot of partnerships. We're going to be taking part in the Intersolar exhibition in Munich. It's the largest renewable energy exhibition, trade fair in probably in Europe. We're going to have a big stand there showing how if you incorporate these flexible data centers. So, you know, we have Siemens Energy working together with us who are looking at, they build the switch systems, you know, high tech. They can see how they can incorporate Bitcoin mining. When we started 2 years ago, we would have sitting around the table would be people who were building houses saying, I would like to incorporate Bitcoin mining into my house. 2 years later, we have the biggest energy companies of Germany sitting at the table. It's interesting. Now, they move very slowly. The beauty of mid-sized companies, which is what we are, is you make decisions very quickly and you can change very quickly. The big companies, the big energy companies, they take ages to make a decision. But we'll get there. It's all about education. And that's why we just need to spend so much time on education. That's why the European Bitcoin Energy Association is important, that we educate, that we highlight the projects that are going on all over Europe. What is already happening? It's happening, but it's not, you don't shout out about it. We're just getting on with it. You want to be careful. There's some mining companies who don't really want to talk about it because they don't want the authorities to then say, oh, I'm cracking down on that. I don't want that. So they rather keep it quiet and just do it, under the radar. I can understand that, but it's much more useful for the infrastructure or for the progression of Bitcoin if people will talk openly about the wonderful projects that they're doing. And so that's one of the main tasks I want to do this year is try to get as many European miners talking openly as possible, and that we highlight on the website, look, there's this going on in this country, there's this going on in this country. It will give people ideas. If I see somebody else incorporating it and I think, oh, well, we've got more or less the same setup, maybe it makes sense for me to incorporate it as well. Mm-hmm. It will be that knock-on effect. It's, we've got an event going on in October, which is hosted by a bank. So there's a bank in Germany, which was the first bank that provides Bitcoin to its customers, but only with self-custody. They understand 100% the beauty of Bitcoin. So you can buy Bitcoin from the bank, but you have to store it on your own hardware wallet, which is perfect, which is how it should be. Yeah. And this bank is a strategic partner of Terahash. And we're putting on a conference in October, the Bitcoin Forum in Germany. And we're going to have a very large section of it, which is just energy. Because people understand a new technology when it solves a problem that they have. And in Europe, in general, we don't realize yet that we have a problem with money. We think money works. Most of us have got a bank account. We've got a credit card. We think that money is working. We don't understand the ill of inflation. But we know in Europe we have a problem with energy. We know we've got a problem. Nobody can deny that our electricity is too expensive, that it's unreliable sources, etc., etc. And so because it's an open problem, we have a problem with energy, and we come along and say, we have a solution to your problem. People are ready to listen to it. So energy is what's going to bring Bitcoin into Europe, not Bitcoin as a money, but Bitcoin mining as a solution to our energy problem.
Yeah, that's definitely like an interesting approach that could bring way more success than the other narrative. That's for sure.
Yeah, because nobody understands that I need lightning. Why do I need lightning? I pay anyway digitally. They'll learn the beauty of lightning, that it's, then it's the privacy and it's the speed and it's the no fees and all the rest of it. But the pain is not there yet. But if you go to other countries where a lot of your people don't have access to bank accounts and they don't have credit cards, then they understand Bitcoin very quickly as a solution to their financial problems. That will come later in Europe. First, it's a solution for our energy problems.
Yeah, because I have a couple of German friends, and then they always complain about the banks and then the high fees and then how slow they are, because like sometimes they even want to just move around the money between their own bank accounts, and then it takes a day or two to actually like get the money. Somehow I feel like it's a bit controversial to be like one of the leading countries in Europe, and then to have like banking system and political system, or like not necessarily political, but like these infrastructures are so outdated. And then we have a country in Africa that is already using like mobile money and Bitcoin just to like.
But this often happens. This is what's interesting. So the African continent, when I grew up, everybody had a landline telephone. Nobody had a mobile phone. Everybody had a landline. So you had a cord connecting to it. And then slowly more and more people have got mobile phones, but still the majority of households still have that landline. Africa never had landline. They went straight to mobile. And it was easy for them to go straight to mobile because, there was no vested interest in keeping this very expensive infrastructure running. And it will be the same with the money. They will go straight. They will skip the banking because they didn't have that, and they can go straight to Lightning. I know when my son showed me the first Lightning transaction, that was another absolute light bulb moment for me, because we've lived abroad in so many different countries. I've always had to do a lot of international transfers. And I know how difficult it is, and I know how long it takes. And my son was actually living in El Salvador for a year. And I could send him money for a beer. If he'd helped me with something on the computer remotely, I could go and buy yourself a beer. Well, you can't send small amounts of money internationally. The fees would gobble it up. Plus, it would take 5, 6, 7 days to arrive. Instantly, I can send a penny. I can send micro amounts of money instantly to the other side of the world. And equally, I can send enormous amounts of money to the other side of the world instant. And when I saw that, bing, you just think, how can a bank compete with that? How can banks compete with this amazing Lightning or whatever? Maybe something even better will come along. But this platform where I can do peer-to-peer payments, anyone can be a part of the network. I don't have to have a bank account. I need to have a mobile phone with internet. I can download my wallet, whether it's Phoenix, whether it's Wallet of Satoshi, there's loads of them. It doesn't matter. And in an instant, I can send value from this side of the world to the other side of the world. And nobody knows about it and nobody can stop it. That's just got to be the future.
Don't you think that banks will try to do their best to stop this innovation as much as possible?
They will, because that's always what history has shown. The big established who have the monopoly, they're not going to want these things coming in. And what the government can do, they can make the on-ramps and the off-ramps difficult. Mm-hmm. That they can do that. They already are doing that. These new MiCA rules that came in on the 1st of January, I was giving a workshop at the beginning of January and getting the participants to set up a Strike wallet. Last year, it took 2 minutes to set up a Strike wallet. Now, this year, with all the new regulations, it was absolutely crazy, the information they had to give. Social security number, address, obviously a copy of their passport or ID or whatever it was. On and on and on and on and on, and answer all these questions. And it was all written in a way that was very against Bitcoin to make people frightened. And it works. Some people, if I have to make a little cross to say, I understand that this is highly speculative and highly dangerous and I might lose all my money, that makes a lot of people who don't understand what it is think, oh, I'm not doing this. Yeah. And it's not the wallet companies who are asking these questions. It's the government who's asking these questions. Yes, that it makes it more difficult and it will put people off. But if they take it further and take it further, the good people are just going to leave. Why would I stay in a country that makes my life difficult? Why does the government want to decide for me how I live my life? They should be there to make my life easier, not to make my life more difficult. So, of course, they are going to fight it because they're not going to want to lose control. What they need to understand is the more they fight it, the more they put themselves at the back of the queue. Mm-hmm. And it's just like the internet. You might have thought at the beginning, or take me, for example, with AI. I watch all my young colleagues using AI for everything that they're doing at work. And I just think, oh, I don't want to learn. This is a new thing. I don't want to learn it. I'm just going to fall further behind if I don't. I'm not going to stop AI. It's coming. So I can choose, do I educate myself and learn what it is and try and incorporate it in a way that will help me in my everyday life? Or do I want to drop behind? It's my choice, because you're not stopping these new technologies. So the government has got a choice. It can either embrace it, understand what it is, and try and use it to the benefit of that country to make that country, number one, number two in the world, or it can make it difficult and lose its talent.
And do you think because of the regulations and how much we are trying to like fight individual freedom will like set Europe back in this race?
I mean, we're seeing right across Europe that people are starting to, they've had enough of ever more regulations, ever more tax, it's too much. You can cope with it to a certain point, and then when you notice that I'm working really hard and there's less and less money on my bank account, and now not only one parent has to go to work, now both parents have to go to work, more and more women are not having children, which is a disaster. I mean, if we're not having children, what's the point? But the whole system is, a woman who stays at home bringing up the children is made to feel like she's a second-class citizen.
Mm-hmm.
But you're doing the most valuable work that can exist. There is nothing more valuable than bringing up the next generation. Nothing is more valuable than bringing up the next generation. How have we managed to persuade our families that you have a baby, it's your most precious asset, and you will hand it over to somebody else to bring it up while you go and sit in an office and make somebody else rich? We're the only species which would, consider anything like that. It's ridiculous. We need to be bringing up our own children. We need to be instilling our own values and our own beliefs in these children, not have them go to a national creche where they get taught to fit into the system. We don't want that. I lived in China 28 years ago when my first daughter was born. And when you went along to the schools, the kindergartens, all the children were always doing the same thing all the time. So that if they were out in the playground, they would all be doing, I remember there were exercises where they would all be standing and then they'd be counting in Chinese, yi, an, san, si, doing all the same arm movements. The workers in the Chinese factories, we were working there for Bosch Siemens, making washing machines, the workers they're like ants. They're part of a system. They're very happy to be part of a system. Tell me what to do and I will do it. Is that the kind of world we want to live in? Or do we want to live in a world where I'm an individual? And the more you put your children into institutions from a very young age, the more they become institutionalized. They don't think for themselves. They do what is wanted from the society or from the institutions. What do I want from them? I want them to not really think for themselves. I want them to go along with, I want to decide what's the best thing for them. Mm-hmm. Nobody can decide what's the best thing for you apart from yourself. And for me, that's what Bitcoin is. It's given me back my power. I have to take a lot of responsibility, which is a big thing. We're not used to taking responsibility anymore. We're used to, especially in Europe, you think you've got this social welfare system that if I lose my job, I'll get some money. If I'm sick, I'll get my money. That's not how life works. Life is brutal and life is unfair. And if the governments take too much away from Peter to give to Paul, there comes a time when Peter says, I'm not doing this anymore. And I think we're coming to that point where enough people are going to say, I'm not doing this anymore.
Do you live in Germany currently?
Yes. Yes.
So like these views sound very controversial when it comes to Germany, especially because it's very left-leaning country in this sense.
It is, but we have elections coming up in February, and the party at the moment, which is getting most of the attention and most of the likes and most is a right-wing party.
Okay.
But I personally believe, what I believe is that the system is broken and no political party can fix it. I don't care if you're left-wing, I don't care if you're right-wing. It's until my government is working on sound money, until I can really measure how well my government is doing. While the government can still print money as it will, so it wants to have a war in Ukraine, okay, it doesn't need to take taxes from me, it can print money. It makes me poor, but it makes me poor afterwards. I don't really notice. I've got no control over it. So in my opinion, until we've fixed the money problem, it doesn't matter whether you vote in for a left-leaning government, a right-leaning government. They all make the same promises. all they're interested in is being re-elected. So they will promise to the people, and the people are stupid. They think there's a free dinner. There's no such thing as a free dinner.
Mhm.
You have to be responsible for yourself. You have to be responsible for your family. You have to be responsible for your neighbors. You have to be responsible for your society. That's how society works. And we've now moved to this thing where you've got this great power up there who decides, I'm going to take so much away from this person, and I think I want to give it to this person, this person, this person. And I've got no choice in the matter. It could work if it had stayed at they take 10% of your salary or they take 20% of your salary.
Mhm.
But now it's, nearly half of your salary going on in income tax. Then you've got your VAT. Then if you've invested the money, then you have to pay on your investments. And then when you die, you pay again, and you've paid already tax. It's ridiculous. Every euro that is earned is taxed again and again and again. And it's never enough. It doesn't matter how much money the government has, it's never enough.
Yeah, and then they are still going into debt, and then they are still like printing more and more, and then especially in Hungary, even though we have like the European funds are coming in, like the people are usually not seeing any penny of it.
No.
So,
and when times get difficult, people get more and more nationalist, and they get very divided. And it's the first thing. It's very easy to make people divided. It's very easy for the powers to be to point to specific groups and say they're the problem. So is it the people who didn't get vaccinated? Are they the problem? Is it the people who, is it the immigrants coming in? Are they the problem? Let's point to somebody and they're the problem. And, like in the Second World War with the Germans, it's the Jews. So this is a very easy thing to do. And the people, we're so stupid. We're so stupid. We don't take everybody on a person by person. We lump everybody together as a group. But if you start thinking about people all as individuals, you can't lump people together as a group. And if, what do we really want? What are we trying to achieve here? I want my government to be truly accountable. And they are only accountable if they have to deal in the same way as I do. I have a certain amount of money that I earn, and I have to budget with this money. And I can't spend more than I've got. I'll be bankrupt. So why doesn't the same apply for the government? Why doesn't the same apply for the big corporations? So this is the whole thing with this book, with Check Your Financial Privilege. We are not working on an equal playing field. And until the playing field is level and the same rules apply to you as apply to me, whether you are the leader of the government or the baker or whatever, that's the only way that we'll have a fair society. Yes, there'll be rich people, there'll be poor people. That's life. Life's tough.
yeah, but like if you are in on Bitcoin, then I mean, I'm not coming from a fortunate background, but I'm sure that like I wouldn't be able to be here where I am today without Bitcoin. So that can like really turn your life around and then put you in a trajectory that is way more successful than you were like sought out to be at birth. Yeah, so like now I live in England, and the more west we go, the more this credit culture is setting in. So like every day I see or 5 or 10 different like advertisements of credit cards that you should go and like have a loan and then put you into more debt and more like kind of like more of an insecure spot when it comes to finances, which is kind of annoying because like the more education we try to do on the other side with Bitcoin, I feel like the banks and in general society, how it is set up right now, it's trying to make you dependent of everything that is
It's the
around us.
craziest system. This whole to work out whether you should get a loan whether you can get a loan from the bank, they want to see your credit rating. And in order to get a good credit rating, you need to have loans.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, how stupid is that? Why wouldn't you say the person who's got no loans at the moment is much more creditworthy than someone who's... It's a ridiculous system which is designed to keep you enslaved. If you have got a lot of loans, you have to keep working, you have to keep churning and feeding the system. And we've become this high preference. I want it now. I want my holidays, I want my car, I want my this, I want it all now, rather than saving up and buying it when I could afford it. It's you get easy money. That's people like that. They take the easy money, and it will all be very different with Bitcoin. There will be no easy money. You will think very, very seriously before you lend your Bitcoin to somebody else to do a business venture. You will think very, very seriously about it. There will still be lending, but it will be with proper due diligence, because if they get it wrong, you're not seeing that money again. It's gone. It's gone. Whereas at the moment, what we've got is, the bank can just print more and give it, give it to the big corporations first. They don't have to be efficient. Mm-hmm. We worked all of our life for big corporations working around the world. First it was Bosch Siemens, and then it was MAN. They're not efficient. I mean, the wastage is absolutely unbelievable. And then they're subsidized by the poor little guy when things get tough. Then these companies, they're too big to fail. So let's take the money from the little guy and keep them stocked up, even though they're not efficient. That's not going to happen with Bitcoin. It's going to be an exciting. We've no idea what it's going to be like. We've never had this before. We've never had a money which is decentralized with rules without rulers. We've never had it.
Do you think like hyperbitcoinization can come in our lifetime?
I can choose to live a Bitcoin life. Mm-hmm. So I don't mind what the other people choose to do. It doesn't matter to me. Is the rest of the world using it? I can pay my rent in Bitcoin, and I can choose to go to the restaurants which accept it. And so nobody knows what the future is going to be. I can't bear all these price predictions. Because it's irrelevant. I don't know what 1,000 euros is going to be worth in 10 years. I might only be able to buy a bread roll for it. So these kind of discussions, how much is Bitcoin going to be worth in 4 years? I don't know what I can buy with those euros. Bitcoin's going up in value forever. Mm-hmm. And I'm not interested in, I do not buy my Bitcoin, or I don't change my money from euro to Bitcoin in order to get more euros in the future. I change my euros into Bitcoin so that I've got a strong, stable money. So Bitcoin, I don't know how long it's going to last. I don't know whether it's going to be 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. I hope I see a lot of change in my lifestyle, in my lifetime. I think we will. I think it will, when it flips. I mean, if you look at the history of money, when money dies, it dies overnight. There's no, it's slowly at the beginning, but once you hit a certain tipping point where inflation gets into double digits, then it goes very quickly. I mean, look at Germany. Look at the history of Germany. We've had hyperinflation in Germany. I lived in South Africa. We went over the border to Zimbabwe. You see the dollar bills, the $1 trillion lying on the floor. Mm-hmm. It will happen to all currencies. We think it won't happen to, but it will. So it's already happening.
It's just very scary to think about like all the people that are not prepared for another situation like this. It's just tough. Because like most of these, so when a currency fails, like the people in general who suffer the most are not the ones that were in the top and were like causing all these problems. It's the ones that are like working from months to months and trying to secure like a stable future for their families.
That's very true. However, the poorer you are, you have nothing anyway. And then if you move on to a Bitcoin standard, at least when you're selling your time and energy, you're earning something which is of extremely high value, which will go up in the future. So they will still benefit from the fact that we're moving on to a system of sound money. In fact, they will benefit more from Bitcoin than anyone, because finally your time and energy will be properly reimbursed and nobody can dilute it. So they suffer the most from the fiat system that we've got now. 100%, they suffer the most from the fiat system. They will benefit from a Bitcoin system. So it's going to be painful. There's a lot of people who don't want to understand it. I mean, we had somebody at our lab tour last week, and you can tell if somebody wants to learn something new or somebody is just trying to tell you why you're wrong.
Mhm.
And he was one of these guys who was just trying to, everything that we said, we were wrong. And he knew it all. He was an older guy and he'd seen it all and he knows how the world works.
Yeah, yeah, of
Um,
course.
hey, you don't have to, if you don't want to see it, that's fine. There are so many people I know who you talk to, they're not interested. They don't want to know. They don't want change. It's too much for them. They'd rather stick to the old world, old world. The old world's going. Whether you want it or not, it's going.
And what advice would you give to yourself, like in the beginning of your journey? Is there like anything that like you really needed to hear back then that like now you know would be beneficial?
Honestly, it's study Bitcoin. It's study it. The more you learn about it, the more you learn about why it's a superior form of money, the more secure you feel in yourself. So I don't know what the future is going to bring. I've got no idea, but I have this feeling of hope and optimism because I believe through my research and my study that I've done that we are moving to a better world. It's not going to be a perfect world. Nothing's ever perfect. And the pendulum will swing too far in the other direction because it always does. You know, it's always, we're always in cycles. But the more you understand something, the less fear you have of it. You have fear when you don't understand something. So try and understand it. I mean, it's like when when I first started working, which was quite a while ago, and I went into my office. I was working at the university in Regensburg, and they said, "This is your email address," and I had no idea what an email address was. And I said, "Oh, what's that? What do I need that for?" Well, so you can talk to, you can send messages to your colleagues, and I can just go knock on the door. Why do I need to? The internet was inconceivable.
Mhm.
But a few years later, you can't think of life without the internet. So things seem absolutely inconceivable. And then a few years later, it's just like they've never been not there. That's what will happen, I believe. But it will be painful. I believe that the transition will be painful, not just to money. I think we've got a big shake-up coming. I feel it strongly that there's a lot of change in the air. And always when you change from one system to another, it's messy. It's not just about Bitcoin. We are moving from the industrial age into the information age. There's going to be people who lose their jobs. There's going to be people who lose. It was always like that, but there will be gains as well. And that's progress. That's human progress.
Probably that's why it's like very important to like we cannot make more bitcoins, but we can make more bitcoiners.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially like as a lady, when it's like kind
Yes.
of discouraged now.
Yes. Oh, please have children and bring them up to understand how the world really works. I mean, it's funny because I obviously live in a bubble because I work in Bitcoin and I know a lot of Bitcoiners and I spend a lot of my time. And then, over Christmas, I was in England, where some of my children live. My daughter was getting married. And then you're at this completely normal wedding and you realize the vast majority of the world has no idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
So is it going to take longer than I hope it will take? Maybe. But at least we've got it. Imagine we didn't have it.
And especially with education and all these initiatives, I know that like not like specifically Bitcoin or Bitcoiners, but like many of the altcoin projects are focusing on educating kids. So they are like pivoting in a space where like you already like talk about Bitcoin to kindergarten kids, and then like kids in high school. So yeah, I think we are headed to a better future.
Absolutely. And I mean, I offered my Christmas present to my nieces and my nephews was a workshop on how to set up a hardware wallet, and then I put some Satoshis on it. And when I was watching them doing that, they were so quick. When I think how long it took me to set up my first hardware wallet they're so quick. For them, they live in this digital world. It's easy for them. That's what they know. They feel comfortable with it. They will learn very, very quickly. And there's a whole generation of children who've now been born who will never know a world without Bitcoin. So for them, it will be, that's what it is.
Yeah. exactly. Like just like we grew up not knowing how life is without internet.
Yeah. Or
It's,
not having, mobile phones. I was really lucky. I was the last generation of parents where there were no mobile phones or hardly. So I could bring up my children without mobile phones.
Mhm.
I would hate to be bringing up children now with mobile phones, because it's not only the children who are addicted, it's the parents who are addicted. And I'm the worst. I'm the worst one at trying to limit it. It was so much easier when it just wasn't a thing. But you have to learn with all technologies. You have to learn how to deal with them, that you control them and they don't control you. That's always the secret of it. But you can't ignore them, because if you ignore them, you're the one who suffer. If you don't have a mobile phone, you can't exist in this life nowadays. Yeah? So we're going to have to go along with AI. We're going to have to go along with Bitcoin. It's just, we're moving into a digital world. Of course, we need to have a purely digital currency. Do I want it to be a central bank digital currency, or do I want it to be an independent, decentralized digital currency? Well, I know what choice I make, but everyone else is free to make whatever choice they want to. And I think that's the best way for people to see, what world do I want to live in? Don't preach to them, just live in that world. And then show by example, hey, I can be quite relaxed about what's going on in the world because I feel quite confident that I'll be okay. And people notice that. And then they're much more open to, well, why is it different for you? And you say, well, what is this Bitcoin? Whereas if you try and hammer it onto them and say, you need to understand it. This was my mistake at the beginning. Totally. When you understand what it is, you want to missionary everybody and say, you've got to understand this. It's brilliant. It's wonderful. It doesn't work. When people are ready to understand something and they want to know about it, that's when their brain is open, and that's when they'll learn new things. But until they're ready, there's no point. There's no point trying.
Rachel, do you have anything else that you would like to share with our audience today?
If they've managed to stay this long, thank you very much for listening. All I can recommend is take the time. It takes a lot of studying, but you will be so grateful that you did it afterwards. So I don't know, do you like to learn by books? Do you like to learn by podcasts? Do you like to learn by videos? There's so many different ways. We're so lucky now. There's so much information out there. Why would you not invest 2 weeks of your life to understand something that could completely change your life?
Rachel, thank you so much. It was an amazing conversation, and definitely very useful for our listeners as well. And I would like to thank you for all the work that you do, especially like bringing women into the space as well, apart from making Bitcoin mining sustainable, because like these two things I feel like are the most important in the next 5-10 years to actually like make an impact in the space. So thank you.
Hopefully we can try. Thank you very much for your time as well, and I'm sure we'll meet again.
Thanks for tuning in to Bitcoin Kebab, the podcast by BitcoinBázis.